Hi everyone, I'm Rincey and this is Rincey Reads. Today I'm going to be doing a book review on Immunity by Eula Biss. This is a nonfiction book that is about vaccinations. This is set up as more like a collection of essays that covers the topics of vaccinations. This isn't like a super deep history, although this book does a really good job of covering the history of vaccinations. But Eula Biss basically uses her life and her experiences of being a mother as like a framework of talking about vaccinations. This was probably my favorite read of February. I found this to be super interesting, super well done. It's a pretty short book, but I actually took my time with this one because I think that the information in here is just so interesting but also very intricate, so I didn't want to like rush through it or anything like that. But every chapter she sort of talks about her experiences with being pregnant and being a mother, and even just her experiences growing up because her father was a doctor, and using all of that to inform just sort of what her opinions were as well as what her opinions are about vaccinations. At least in the United States, there seems to be this weird climate about vaccinations happening. Certain mothers or parents don't want to give their kids vaccinations because they believe it'll be more harmful in the future, and we don't have a lot of information about it and the long-term effects of vaccinations. There's a lot of myths out there about what vaccinations do and don't do, or a lot of misconceptions out there, and Eula Biss does a really good job of just talking about where vaccinations came from, how they got it started, what effect they have on our society, and sort of like the history of different diseases. I think she does a really good job about talking about the positive effects of vaccinations, of course, but also covering why people would be against vaccinations and at least explaining their side for someone like me who doesn't really get it. I'm not a mother, I don't have kids, and I got vaccinated when I was a kid, so I don't necessarily always understand why mothers would choose not to vaccinate their children. And so I feel like reading this book, I got a little bit more insight into their perspective, which I actually really liked, even though I don't agree with them. Whenever I don't agree with people, I kind of just want to know where they're coming from with their opinions, and so I feel like with this book I was able to understand their perspective a little bit better. Another thing that I really liked about this book was the fact that Eula Biss takes the history of like vampires in pop culture and literature and uses that as sort of a larger metaphor when talking about vaccinations and diseases and our fears as society and things like that, which I was not expecting whatsoever when I went into this book. Like, I knew it was about vaccinations, and even the personal things weren't that surprising because that makes sense, but I think tying in vampires was a very interesting theme to explore in this book. And again, like I said, this book isn't very long, but she's able to cover that very well, as well as covering like the history of vaccinations and her own personal stuff. So she's very succinct, I suppose you could say, but she doesn't do it in a way that compromises the information. I think if you are someone who is interested in vaccinations at all, obviously pick up this book, but I think that in general this is a really good read. I think if you like essay collections, you'll probably like this book. If you're looking for some nonfiction to read and you're not normally a nonfiction reader, then I definitely recommend this book because I feel like it's so readable and so interesting that it's not going to be boring. I think even if you're someone who doesn't normally read a lot of nonfiction, this isn't really boring. Like, this isn't super dry medical information. The fact that she's able to tie in her own life and her own story and talk about the different controversies makes it super interesting. So yeah, in the end, I give this book a 4 out of 5 stars. I think this is a really interesting book, and I definitely think this would be a good book club book pick because I think there's a lot to discuss and take apart and dissect, and I think talking about it with other people would be really, really interesting. So yeah, those are my thoughts on Immunity. If you've read this book, please leave comments down below letting me know what you guys thought of it, what you guys thought were your most interesting sections to you, or the most interesting things that you learned about vaccinations in this book. Or if you have any questions about this book, feel free to leave that down in the comment section as well. So yeah, that's all I have for now. Thanks for watching.